The laughter started before Ambassador Colin Hale even reached the podium. I heard it ripple through the upper tiers of the grand chamber first, the way a wave moves across water. Their pale throat sacs vibrating in that low, rhythmic pulse that translated directly as amusement. Then it spread. The Varathi contingent clicked their mandibles. The Solari representative leaned toward her aide and whispered something that made them both tilt their heads back. Within seconds, the sound had moved through 47 delegations and settled into the air like something permanent. Colin Hale kept walking. I was seated in the observer gallery, 3 levels above the main floor, as was my station as a council intelligence liaison. I had been in this chamber for 11 years. I had seen species argue, plead, threaten, and on 2 occasions, attempt physical confrontations that required the security drones to intervene. But I had never heard laughter quite like this. It was not mean-spirited, not exactly. It was the laughter of people who do not believe the person walking toward them is capable of surprising them. Colin Hale was a human. That was the first mark against him. In the Council's silent accounting, humanity had been a registered species in the Galactic Council for 31 years. 31 years was nothing. Most species in that chamber had been members for centuries. The Kelvari had been members for over 4,000 years. The Drath hegemony for 800. Humanity was new, small, and by every measurable military metric, weak. They had 11 warships. 11. The Drath hegemony alone operated 460. So when the Drath had moved into 3 of humanity's outer colony systems 8 weeks ago, claiming them under the hegemony's ancient territorial expansion doctrine, the galaxy had watched and waited to see what humanity would do. The answer, when it came, had spread through council channels like a very quiet joke. Humanity had filed a formal grievance. Through the proper legal channels, with all required documentation attached, submitted to the Council Registrar's office on a Tuesday. The laughter in this chamber was the delayed response to that Tuesday. Colin Hale reached the podium. He was not a large man. He was perhaps 50 years old by human reckoning, with short gray hair and a plain gray suit. He carried a single physical folder, which was so unusual in a chamber full of holographic displays, that several delegates looked at it the way you might look at someone who arrived at a formal dinner carrying their food in a paper bag. He set the folder on the podium, opened it without hurry, and waited for the laughter to die. It did not die immediately. He waited anyway. When the chamber finally quieted, he looked up. He did not look angry. He did not look embarrassed. He looked, if I had to name it, like a man who had already finished the conversation he was about to have, and knew how it ended. "I am here," he said, "to submit Earth's formal grievance regarding the occupation of the Harrow system, the Callum system, and the outpost station designated Point Lyra. This grievance is filed under Article 77, Section C of the Galactic Council Charter, specifically the clause governing unlawful territorial seizure of registered colony systems during peacetime." He then began to read. He read the entire document, every line, every reference to every article, every date stamp, every recorded communication in which the Drath hegemony had refused to respond to Earth's direct contact attempts. Position. He read the names of the 411 human civilians who had been removed from their homes on Harrow Station and relocated to a detention processing facility. He read the inventory of property seized. He read the Drath hegemony's own public statement claiming the territory. And then he read the specific language from that statement that directly contradicted 3 separate provisions of the Council Charter. Hegemony itself had signed 800 years ago. He was reading for 40 minutes. For the first 10, the chamber was restless. Delegates murmured. Aides passed notes. The Drath ambassador, a broad-shouldered being named Vorth, sat with his arms folded and his throat sac doing that slow, rhythmic pulse that I now understood meant sustained amusement. For the next 20 minutes, the chamber began to settle. Not out of respect, I think, out of something closer to confusion. He was not trying to make it dramatic. He read it the way a person reads a legal record into evidence, which is exactly what he was doing. Every sentence landed flat and precise, and moved on to the next one. There was no anger in his voice. There was no plea. There was just the document. By the final 10 minutes, the chamber was almost completely quiet. I was watching faces. Most of the delegations looked bored, or neutral, or mildly curious. The Drath ambassador had stopped his rhythmic pulsing around the 30-minute mark, and was now simply watching the podium with an expression I could not fully read. His aide had leaned in and whispered something to him twice in the last few minutes. He had not responded either time. I was watching the Kelvari delegate. Her name was Advisor Sarah, and she had held the Kelvari seat on the council for longer than I had been alive. She was very old, and very still, and she had been still in exactly the same way since the moment Colin Hale started reading. But in the last 10 minutes, something had changed in her stillness. It was subtle. Her eyes had moved from the podium to her own lap, where she held a printed copy of the grievance document. I knew she had it because I had seen her aide deliver it to her before the session began. Now she was reading along. At one particular line she stopped. I could not read the line from my position. I watched her read it twice. Then she looked up at Colin Hale. Then she looked down and read it again. Then she folded the document very carefully and set it on the desk in front of her. She folded her hands on top of it. Her expression did not change, but she did not take her eyes off the podium again. No one else noticed. Colin Hale finished reading. He closed the folder. Earth asks the Council, he said, to recognize this grievance as lawfully filed, to direct the Drath hegemony to vacate the 3 listed systems, and to restore the civilian population of Harrow Station to their homes. He paused. Just briefly. We also ask that any further expansion of Drath territorial claims be suspended for a period of 90 days, while the Council considers this matter. Vorth, the Drath ambassador, leaned forward and addressed the chamber without waiting to be recognized. The hegemony rejects the premise of this grievance, he said. His translator rendered his voice flat and assured. The systems in question fall within the ancient boundary claims of the Drath hegemony, predating humanity's registration with this council. Earth has no legal standing to contest them. The council's presiding arbiter, a Vorathi elder named Councillor Dren, turned to the chamber. Is there a motion to consider Earth's grievance? Silence. Is there a motion to dismiss? 7 hands went up at once. The vote was called. The grievance was dismissed by 39 votes to 4, with 11 abstentions. I watched Colin Hale through the vote count. He did not react. He wrote something down in the folder. Then he closed it again. Councillor Dren turned to him. Ambassador Hale, the Council has dismissed Earth's grievance. The Drath hegemony's territorial claims stand. Do you have any final statement? Colin Hale looked up. Only one, he said. We thank the Council for the 90-day suspension of further Drath expansion, as requested. Dren blinked. That was not formally granted, Ambassador. It was simply not addressed. It was not denied, Colin Hale said. He said it very gently. We would like the record to reflect that no objection was raised to the 90-day period. There was a pause. Dren looked at the chamber. No one objected. It was a small thing, a piece of procedural nothing, and no one in that room thought it worth arguing over. The record will reflect it, Dren said. Thank you, Colin Hale said. He picked up his folder, bowed once, and walked toward the exit. I watched him leave. I watched the chamber return to its noise and motion. I watched the Drath ambassador's aide pull out a communications device and begin composing a message, presumably to inform the hegemony that the grievance had been dismissed without consequence. And I watched Advisor Sarah, still seated, still, with her folded hands resting on the document in her lap. She was looking at the door through which Colin Hale had just walked. She did not look amused. She did not look bored. She looked, if I had to name it, like a woman who had just watched someone leave a room after placing something very precise and very dangerous on a table, and who understood, unlike everyone else in the chamber, exactly what had been placed there. I made a note. I did not yet know what the note meant, but I had been in that chamber for 11 years, and in 11 years, I had learned to pay close attention to the things that Advisor Sarah noticed. Everything that followed began in that moment. The laughter, the dismissal, the 90 days. It all began there, in the space between what the council thought it had decided and what had actually just happened. Humanity had filed a grievance. The galaxy had laughed. Neither of those things was the important one. I noticed it not because silence is unusual, but because this particular silence replaced something. Earth's diplomatic relay station had transmitted on a regular cycle. Status updates, trade communications, the routine chatter of a species learning to participate in galactic life. Low volume, unremarkable, the kind of signal you stop consciously registering because it is always there. Like background heat from a reactor. You notice it only when it stops. It stopped on a Wednesday, 9 days after the council session. I flagged it in my daily report. My supervisor, a Vorathi named Counselor Edna, a title she had chosen from a human name registry when she took the position, because she found human-assigned names easier for her to remember, looked at the flag and said, "Probably a relay malfunction. Earth uses older equipment." I left it in my report and moved on. I pulled the transmission logs and confirmed that it was not a relay malfunction. Earth's relay station was functioning perfectly. It was simply not transmitting. All systems online. All systems quiet. As if someone had walked into the relay building, verified that every light was on, and then chosen to say nothing. It happens after a legal defeat. Humans go quiet when embarrassed, and moved on. I was not sure she was wrong. I had limited experience with humans. Most species in the council had limited experience with humans. That was part of the problem I would later understand, but I did not understand it yet. Outer Survey Corridor. The report was routine. The follow-up was not. 2 days later, the Drath hegemony, quietly noted in their internal logistics network. That the freighter had not reached its destination. It had simply stopped transmitting while passing through what was technically unclaimed deep space adjacent to the survey corridor. I pulled the frequency data for the freighter's last transmission. The signal had not cut off the way signals cut off during equipment failure. It had not faded or degraded. It had simply ended. Clean and complete, like someone pressing a button. I made a note. I flagged it separately from the silence. I did not connect them yet, but I kept them in the same folder. On day 30, I attended a council security briefing. The Drath Hegemony's second expansion plan was on the agenda. They had identified 2 more colony systems they intended to claim under their ancient boundary doctrine, both of which sat adjacent to current human space. The presentation was thorough. The hegemony had legal precedent, they argued. They had historical boundary maps going back 6 centuries. Earth had nothing. No objection had been lodged. The 90-day period would expire, and after that, Drath expansion could resume. The Kelvari seat was empty that day. No one mentioned that the freighter was missing. A second Drath vessel stopped transmitting in deep space. This one was a long-range scout, sent specifically to survey the region between 2 of Earth's remaining colony systems in preparation for the hegemony's upcoming expansion. It sent a routine position report at 0700 station time. The hegemony's internal assessment said equipment failure. Their scout craft were old. Extended range missions sometimes lost contact with relay networks. It ended the same way. Clean. Complete. Definite. Then I sat with my hands on my desk for a long time, looking at the label, and thinking about a man who had read a document aloud for 40 minutes, and had not seemed angry once. I sent a request to the Council archives for the full text of Article 77, including all subsections. I had read the primary articles when I took my position. I had not read every subsection. Most liaisons did not. The full charter was 8,000 pages, and most of it was administrative language about filing procedures. The archive sent me the document. I read Section C again. Then I kept reading. I read through Section D, which was short, then Section E, which was longer. Section E covered what the Charter defined as independent action in response to unlawful territorial seizure when formal grievance has been dismissed by the Council. I read it twice, then a third time. The language was old, 800 years old, from the era when the Council was still being established, and the founding species were still writing rules to govern the conflicts they had already survived. The language was precise in the way that only language written by people who had been through something terrible is precise. It left very little room for interpretation. Then I read the subsection below it. Section E, Article 3. It was 11 lines long. I closed the document. I opened the grievance that Colin Hale had read aloud. I found the line that Advisor Sarah had read twice, and then folded away. It was near the end of the document, in a section most people would have stopped paying attention to by the time he reached it. It was written in plain language, not legal jargon, not diplomatic phrasing, just a sentence. Earth reserves the right, under Section E, Article 3 of the Galactic Council Charter, to take any and all independent action it deems necessary to recover its territories, beginning no earlier than the conclusion of the requested 90-day period, without further notice to the Council or to the Drath hegemony. I sat very still. That line had been in the document. It had been read aloud in open chamber. It had been filed in the Council Registrar's office. It was part of the official record, and the Council had voted to dismiss the grievance without reading the document carefully enough to notice it. I pulled Section E, Article 3 again. Under that article, a species whose formal grievance had been dismissed by the Council, and whose requested cooling period had been noted and not denied, was legally permitted to take independent military action to recover its own territory. The action did not need to be announced. It did not need Council approval. It did not need to follow standard engagement protocols. The only requirements were that the grievance had been filed, that it had been dismissed, and that the cooling period had been allowed to stand on the record. All three conditions had been met, publicly, in the Council chamber, with 47 delegations present. I looked at the date. 44 days had passed since the session. 46 days remained in the 90-day period. The Drath hegemony was still planning their second expansion. They were still calling their missing vessels equipment failures. They were still, I realized, laughing. That was the day I stopped sleeping well. On day 47, I found the message. It came through a damaged relay beacon in the outer corridor, the kind of half-broken station that the Council kept online more out of bureaucratic inertia than practical need. The signal was partial, auto-routed through 3 secondary nodes before it reached the main network. Most of it had degraded beyond recovery. 3 words survived, in the Drath Hegemony's military battle code, a code that was technically classified, but that Council intelligence liaisons had held the translation key for since the Hegemony joined the Council 4 centuries ago. Unknown origin. Had been operating in the region near Earth's survey corridor. A scout that the Hegemony had logged as lost to equipment failure. I wrote up the full report that afternoon and submitted it to Edna. She read it, went quiet for a moment, and said she would escalate it. I asked her to escalate it urgently. She said she would. I do not know if she did, or what happened to that report after it left my desk. What I know is that no emergency session was called. The Council continued its regular schedule. The Drath Hegemony continued their expansion planning. 3 days later, I sat in the security briefing and listened to a Drath logistics officer brief the Council on the timeline for their second wave of territorial claims, which would begin after the 90-day period expired. Nobody mentioned the battle code signal. Earth had not said a single word in 47 days. I requested a private meeting with advisor Sarah. Her aide replied the same day and confirmed a time. I was prepared to tell her what I had found, what I had pieced together. I wanted to know if I was right. Her aide met me at the door to the Kelvari suite, handed me a folded note, and told me the meeting had been moved to a later date at the advisor's request. I opened the note. 4 words. Keep watching. Keep counting. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. I went back to my desk. I opened the folder with both transmission reports and the battle code signal. I added a new document. I started a countdown from 90. I was on day 47. 43 days remained. A third Drath vessel went silent. On day 70, a fourth. On day 78, the hegemony quietly doubled the patrol coverage of their own border sector, citing what their internal communications described as unexplained sensor interference near survey routes. Sensor interference did not lose ships. Sensor interference did not produce a distress signal in military battle code. Sensor interference did not make experienced long-range scouts fall silent with their final transmission, cutting off clean and complete as the press period of a single deliberate button. Something was in the dark near human space. Whatever it was, it had been there long before the council session, long before the grievance, long before Colin Hale stood at that podium and read 40 minutes of documentation into the official record. They had not sent it after the session. They had sent it before. While they were still filing the paperwork, Day 89 arrived on a morning that felt like every other morning. I went to my desk. I opened the folder. I stared at the number. One day remained. I pulled up the status of the Drath Second Expansion Fleet. It had departed its staging point 4 days ago. It was moving toward the 2 target systems on schedule. The hegemony expected to complete the transit and begin claiming procedures on day 90/24. 2 days after the cooling period formally expired. I looked at the number again. Day 89. Then I looked at the signal records from the Drath expansion fleet. All active, all transmitting normally. I remember the exact feeling of reading those green status lights. I remember the way they looked solid, and certain, and reassuring on my screen. I remember thinking for one moment that perhaps I had been wrong. Perhaps I had spent 43 days building a picture from fragments that didn't connect. I closed the file. I went to get something to eat. I tried to think about something else. The next morning, at 0300 station time, every long-range relay station between Drath Space and the Council Core systems lit up at once. The night operator on duty said afterward that the sound of the alarms was unlike anything she had heard in 12 years of monitoring. Not because it was loud. Because it did not stop. I was already awake when the priority signal reached me. I had not slept much. I reached my desk in 4 minutes and opened the feed. For a long moment, I just sat there reading. The Drath expansion fleet was gone. Not gone as in retreated, not gone as in turned back. Had dropped off the relay network within a 4-hour window overnight. The hegemony's border patrol stations were screaming. Their command network was flooded with priority signals that kept overlapping each other. Every response they sent crossed with another incoming emergency message before it could be answered. I pulled the relay data and started reading backward from the last known transmission of each ship. I was looking for the same thing I had found in the smaller vessels. I was looking for transmissions that ended clean. I found them. All 43. Then I found something else. The timing. Every ship in the fleet had gone silent within the same 4 hours. Not in sequence, as you would expect if they had encountered a single threat moving through them one by one. Not in clusters, as you would expect if they had engaged multiple attackers in isolated battles. They had gone silent in a distributed pattern, spread across a volume of space that no single fleet should have been able to cover simultaneously. Or not just a fleet. I sat with that thought for a long time. Then I pulled the survey mission records that Earth had filed with the Council over the last 3 years. Survey missions were routine. Species filed them constantly. They were one of the least reviewed categories of documentation in the Council archives, because survey missions were exactly as boring as they sounded. A ship goes out. It maps something. It files a report. Earth had filed 63 survey mission reports in the past 3 years. I started reading them. By the 6th one, I had stopped breathing normally. By the 12th, I had to stand up and walk to the window and look at the station's central hub for a moment, before I could go back to reading. The survey routes were not random. They had not been chosen to explore uncharted territory. Plotted on a map, they formed a pattern. A deliberate, careful, interlocking pattern that covered every approach route, every logistics corridor, every staging point and supply depot in the region adjacent to human space, including the routes the Drath hegemony used. Earth had spent 3 years mapping the hegemony's military infrastructure under the cover of routine survey reports. Filed with the Council. Reviewed by no one, legal, documented, and completely invisible in plain sight. And somewhere in those routes, over those 3 years, they had left something behind. Not ships. Ships would have been detected. Something smaller. Something patient. Something that could wait in the dark for 89 days and then, on a single coordinated signal, I was still reading when my communications panel lit up with a priority message from the council chamber. An emergency session had been called. I looked at the time. It was day 90. I had been right about the day that mattered. One of the first things I noticed was that the Kelvari seat was already occupied. Advisor Sarah was seated, still and straight, with her hands folded on the desk in front of her. She looked as if she had been there for hours. The second thing I noticed was the Drath ambassador. Vorth was already in his seat as well. He did not look amused. His throat sac was pressed flat against his chest, which in Drath physiology indicated a state somewhere between confusion and alarm. His entire delegation was in motion around him, aides passing devices, whispering, pulling up data on small screens. He looked like a man who had been handed a message in a language he did not recognize and was surrounded by people equally unable to translate it. The chamber filled. The noise was different from usual. Normally, before a session, there was the low background hum of delegations greeting each other, comparing positions, managing the social business that preceded the official business. Today the sound was sharper, shorter sentences, fewer pleasantries. Everyone had seen the relay alerts. Everyone had the same questions. Councillor Dren called the session to order without the usual procedural openings. The Council has received emergency signals from the Drath hegemony regarding the status of vessels operating in the outer expansion corridor, Dren said. The hegemony has formally requested that the Council investigate the loss of contact with 43 vessels from their second expansion fleet, as well as 4 additional survey and scout craft reported missing in recent weeks. The floor is open. Vorth was on his feet before Dren had finished speaking. 47 vessels, he said. His translator rendered his voice precisely, but underneath the precision, I could hear something that I had never heard from a Drath ambassador before. The edge of something unsteady. 47 Drath hegemony vessels have been lost or destroyed in the past 81 days. The evidence points clearly to deliberate military action. We are requesting the Council identify the responsible party and convene a full war tribunal. Does the hegemony have evidence of the responsible party? Dren asked. There was a pause. Vorth's aide leaned in and said something. Vorth listened and then looked at the floor for a moment. The signal patterns and tactical methodology suggest a coordinated strike, he said. Our analysts are still completing the assessment. Then the hegemony does not yet know who is responsible? Our analysts, Vorth said, have identified certain characteristics of the strike pattern that are consistent with human military doctrine. The chamber went quiet. Not the polite quiet of procedural attention. A harder quiet. The kind that arrives when something real has been said out loud. That is a significant allegation. Is Earth's ambassador present? All heads turned. Colin Hale was already walking down the center aisle. I do not know when he had entered. I had not seen him come in. He was simply there, moving toward the podium at a steady pace, in the same plain gray suit, carrying the same physical folder. He reached the podium. He set the folder down. He looked at Counselor Dren. Earth's ambassador is present, he said. Dren looked at him for a moment. Corridor? I am, Colin said. Can Earth provide any information regarding these losses? Earth can provide a complete account, Colin said. He opened the folder. I think some people in the chamber were expecting another grievance document. Another 40 minutes of careful, flat reading. I saw a few delegates settle back in their seats in preparation. What Colin Hale produced was not a grievance document. It was a military operational report. He began to read. And as he read, what had been a hard silence in the chamber became something else entirely. Something I had never heard in 11 years. It was the silence of a room in which everyone present is slowly revising something they believed about the world. 63 survey missions filed with the Council over 3 years. Each one documented, time-stamped, and legally registered. On each mission, in addition to standard survey activities, Earth vessels had deployed what the report called autonomous monitoring and response packages, small, low-power devices designed to observe vessel traffic, log logistics patterns, and, under specified activation conditions, act. The activation conditions, Colin read without any change in his tone, were as follows. The formal grievance filed on the date of the council session would need to be dismissed. The 90-day cooling period noted in the record would need to pass without the Drath hegemony vacating the 3 colony systems, and the Drath hegemony would need to proceed with any further expansion activity during that period, which would constitute a continuing violation under the terms of the grievance. All 3 conditions had been met. When Drath expansion vessels crossed into the survey corridor en route to their second set of targets, The activation threshold had been reached. The packages had not activated immediately. They had continued to observe and to log. They had mapped every vessel, every route, every timing pattern. They had done this for 42 more days. On day 89, a single encoded signal had gone out from Earth's relay network, which was why, I understood now, the network had gone silent for so long. It had not gone silent in defeat. It had gone silent because it was being reserved for one transmission, sent at the precise moment the operation required it. The packages had activated simultaneously. The expansion fleet did not exist anymore. Colin Hale then read the section of the report covering the 3 colony systems. He read it quietly and carefully, the same as everything else. Earth's recovered colonies. Harrow system, restored to civilian administration as of day 88. Callum system, restored as of day 85. Point Lyra station, secured and returned to operational status as of day 86. Earth had recovered its people before the second expansion fleet was engaged. They had not struck first. They had recovered their own people, documented it, and only then proceeded with the engagement of the expansion force. Every step sequenced to maintain the legal integrity of the operation from beginning to end. Vorth was standing. He had been standing since roughly the 3rd paragraph. "This is an act of war," he said. Colin Hale looked up from the document. "Under what article?" he asked. "What? Under what article of the Galactic Council Charter does Earth's action constitute an act of war?" Colin said. "We filed a grievance. It was dismissed. The 90-day cooling period was noted on the record and not denied. The Drath hegemony continued expansion activity during that period." Article 3. All actions taken were documented before, during, and after the operation, and are being submitted to the Council Registrar this morning as a complete military operations record. Under which article is any of that an act of war? Vorth opened his mouth, then closed it. His aide was pulling up documents on a small screen. pulling them up very fast, then pulling up more, then leaning close to the screen, and reading something with the particular stillness of someone who is reading a thing they did not want to find. The chamber was so quiet I could hear the climate system running. Dren said, very carefully, "Does the Drath Hegemony's delegation require time to consult their legal staff?" There was a very long pause. "Yes," Vorth said. He said it in a way I had never heard a Drath ambassador say anything. Like someone setting a heavy object down because they have finally realized they cannot carry it any further. The session was recessed. I found Advisor Sarah in the corridor outside the chamber. She was walking slowly, which for her was unusual. She stopped when she saw me. I was not sure what to say. I had a folder of notes and fragments and flagged reports that I had been building for 43 days, and all of it had turned out to be exactly what I thought it was. And I still was not sure I fully understood what had happened. She looked at me for a moment. "You found the line in the document," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," I said. "On day 44. She nodded. "I found it while he was still reading it." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "Because," she said, "I wanted to know if they were going to do it." She started walking again. "They did it," I said, after her. She paused without turning around. She said, "They did." She walked away down the corridor. I stood there for a moment, looking at the closed doors of the chamber, where 47 delegations were reconsidering what they believed about a species they had laughed at 8 weeks ago. I went back to my desk. I opened a new document.